I was folding a silk CF tan into my suitcase when the notification lit up my phone. It was my sister Emma. We were 48 hours away from the Malibu reunion I had fully funded. The text read, "Hey, change of plans. Ryan needs the master suite to decompress, so you are on the pull-out cooch. Also, we need you to watch the boys every night from 5 to 10 so we can reconnect. If you can't be a team player, don't bother coming." I stared at the screen. The audacity wasn't just breathless, it was suffocating. Before I tell you what I did next, I have to know. Drop a comment and tell me what is the most audacious thing a family member has ever asked you to do for free. I'm reading every single one. I didn't throw my phone across the room. I didn't type out a paragraph of angry text messages. I simply set the device face down on my duvet. In my line of work as an architect, when a structure is fundamentally compromised, you don't paint over the cracks. You condemn the building. I opened my laptop, logged into the rental portal for Sapphire Cove. The itinerary stared back at me, a digital monument to my own desperation. There it was, the 7-bedroom glass-walled villa on the cliffs of Malibu. The private chef booked for 5 nights to ensure my mother didn't have to lift a finger. The sunset boat charter for Ryan's birthday. The total came to $21,900. I had paid it in full 6 months ago, convincing myself it was a generous gift to bring us all together. But looking at it now under the harsh glare of Emma's ultimatum, I saw it for what it really was. It wasn't a gift. It was a bribe. I moved my cursor to the Modify Booking tab. My hand didn't shake. This was just business now. I selected Cancel Entire Itinerary. A pop-up window warned me about the non-refundable deposit of $2,000. I didn't care. That was a remarkably cheap price to pay for my dignity. I clicked Confirm. Then I went to the Concierge Service tab. The chef, cancel the boat. Cancel. The private yoga instructor, meant for my mother. Cancel. As the confirmation emails began to ping into my inbox. Refund processed, booking, terminated service, voided. I felt a strange cold sensation wash over me. It wasn't regret. It was the sudden jarring clarity of a recovering addict. For years I had been caught in what psychologists call the gambler's trap. It is that sick sinking feeling that you have invested too much to walk away. Now you tell yourself that if you just put one more coin in the machine, one more lavish vacation, one more Bylade out credit card, one more silent sacrifice, the lights will finally flash. The jackpot will drop. You will finally buy the one thing you can't afford, their respect. I sat there in the silence of my bedroom, realizing I had been standing at that slot machine for a decade, feeding it everything I had, waiting for a payout that was mathematically impossible. The machine wasn't broken, it was rigged, and the only way to win was to stop playing. My phone buzzed again, likely a follow-up text from Emma asking if I had seen her demands or if I was ready to fall in line. I didn't check it. I watched the refund notification hit my banking app. $21,900 returned to the principal balance. The trip was gone. The villa was gone. The illusion that I could purchase my way into this family's heart was gone. The room was quiet, and for the first time in years the air didn't feel heavy. It felt expensive. I closed my laptop, leaving the cancellation emails open on the screen like a victorious scoreboard. But the victory felt hollow, and my mind drifted backward, retracing the steps that had led me to this cliff edge. It wasn't just about one trip. It was never just about one trip. I opened a new document on my computer, titling it The Ledger. It was time to audit the cost of being a daughter in this family. I started typing, my fingers flying across the keys as years of suppressed resentment poured out. Item 1. 5 years ago, Dad's sure thing investment that imploded. I wired him $15,000 to stop the foreclosure on their house. He never paid me back, and worse, he never mentioned it again. It was as if the money had simply materialized out of thin air, a divine intervention rather than my hard-earned savings. Item 2. Emma's mommy makeover. 3 years ago, she cried to me about how her body was ruined after the twins, how she couldn't look Ryan in the eye. I paid for the surgery, $8,000, telling myself I was helping my sister regain her confidence. She posted photos from the recovery suite, thanking her husband for making her feel beautiful again. My name was nowhere in the caption. Item 3. The landscaping. My parents' house, the one I had saved from foreclosure, needed a complete overhaul to increase its market value. As a landscape architect, I designed the entire project for free. I spent weekends digging, planting, and installing irrigation systems, sweating under the summer sun while they sipped iced tea on the porch. The materials cost me $12,000. The labor priceless, apparently. When they hosted a garden party to show off the new yard, my mother told the guests she had finally gotten around to fixing up the place. I stood there, dirt still under my fingernails, and smiled. The list went on. the emergency car repairs for Ryan, the private school tuition for my oldest nephew when Emma claimed they were short, the endless stream of dinners, gifts, and bailouts. I tallied the total at the bottom of the page. $45,000. $45,000 spent buying my way into a family that treated me like a utility bill, essential but resentful to pay. I sat back staring at the number. I realized then that I was what psychologists call a glass child. The term usually refers to siblings of children with disabilities, but in my family it applied perfectly to the competent one. They looked right through me to see the problems of everyone else. I was transparent, durable, and expected to hold everything together without shattering. If I cracked, I was defective. If I held firm, I was invisible. My worth had been transactional from the start. I wasn't loved for who I was valued for what I could provide. I was the venture capitalist funding a failing startup called Family, pouring capital into a business model that produced zero returns. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I hadn't been generous. I had been paying a tax just to exist in their orbit. And today, for the first time in my life, I had stopped paying. The silence in the room felt heavy, charged with the static of a storm about to break. I saved the document. I didn't close it. I wanted it. Open, a stark reminder of the price I had paid for the illusion of love. The phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a text. It was a call from my mother. I watched it ring, the screen lighting up the darkened room. And for the first time I didn't feel the urge to answer. The bank was closed and the vault was locked. I sat in my air-conditioned living room, a cup of tea steaming gently on the coaster, and watched the digital fallout begin. It took 4 hours for the reality of my actions to travel from the banking servers to the gates of Sapphire Cove. The timing was impeccable. By my calculations, my family had just landed at Lax, rented the oversized SUV required to haul Emma's luggage, and driven the hour north to Malibu in the sweltering July heat. The first notification wasn't a text. It was a notification from the rental app, confirming the cancellation had been pushed to the property management system. Then the silence broke. My phone began to vibrate across the coffee table, a relentless angry buzz that sounded like a trapped wasp. It was Emma. "We are at the gate," her text read. "The code isn't working, send it again." I didn't reply. I took a sip of tea. 2 minutes later. "Seriously, Kat, the boys are screaming. It is 90 degrees out here. Stop playing games and send the code." Then came the call from my mother, Monica. I let it go to voicemail. The transcription appeared on my screen a moment later. "Catherine, pick up the phone. The property manager says the reservation was voided. There must be a mistake with your card. Fix this immediately. Your father is about to have a heat stroke." I closed my eyes and let the image wash over me. I knew the layout of Sapphire Cove intimately. I had spent weeks studying the blueprints to ensure it was perfect for them. I could picture the scene, the massive iron gates shimmering in the heat haze, the black SUV idling on the asphalt, the air conditioning struggling against the midday sun. My 4 nephews tired and overstimulated from the flight melting down in the back seat, and my family standing outside the glass fortress I had paid for, realizing for the first time that the key didn't belong to them. Emma's text shifted from annoyed to unhinged. "You are jealous," she wrote. "You have always been jealous of my family. You are a bitter spinster who can't stand that I have a life and you have nothing but money. You ruined this trip on purpose because you are sick." Jealousy, that was their go-to defense. It was easier to believe I was envious of their chaos than to admit they were parasites feeding on my peace. But the panic in the messages revealed the truth. They weren't angry because they missed my company. They were panicked because they couldn't afford to be there without me. My father, Brandon, finally chimed in. His text was short, sharp, and entirely focused on the optics. "We already posted the arrival photos on Facebook. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? You need to call the agency and rebook. Put it on mic. If you have to, and we will sort it out later." Sort it out later. That was the family motto. Later meant never. Later meant I would pay the bill and he would conveniently forget the conversation. But there was no later. The villa was booked by someone else. I had checked the calendar. And even if it wasn't, I knew for a fact that my father's credit card had been maxed out since Christmas. They were stranded in one of the most expensive zip codes in America with no reservation, no money, and an audience of 4 screaming children. I watched the notifications stack up like debris from a shipwreck. They weren't asking why I was hurt. They weren't apologizing for the ultimatum. They were furious that the help had quit in the middle of a shift. The heatwave in Malibu was nothing compared to the scorching realization that without me they were just people in a hot car with nowhere to go. I turned my phone over. The screen went dark. The gate remained closed. I turned my phone off completely. Silence that filled my bungalow wasn't empty. It was heavy with the weight of a decision made. The emotional phase of this conflict was over. Now I was entering the forensic phase. In my profession, when a building collapses, you don't just clear the rubble, you analyze the debris to find the structural failure. You find the rot. I walked into my home office and pulled the banker's box from the top shelf of the closet. It was labeled Property and Family. Inside were the blueprints for my parents' renovation, the receipts for materials, and the carbon copies of checks I had written over the years. If I was going to sever ties, I needed to ensure the separation was absolute. I needed to perform a full audit of the bank of cat before I permanently closed the branch. I sat at my desk, the air conditioner humming a low, steady note, and began to sort through the last 12 months of transactions. It was a graveyard of generosity. Airline tickets, tuition payments, loans for business expenses that were never repaid, but as I reconciled the bank statements against my memory, my finger stopped on a transaction from last November. Check number 402, $10,000. I remembered the day, I wrote it vividly. My father had called me in a panic at 2:00 in the afternoon. He said the roof had sprung a catastrophic leak during a storm. He said water was pouring into the living room, ruining the hardwood floors I had paid to install. He said the insurance wouldn't cover it because of deferred maintenance, and the roofer needed cash up front to start the emergency tarping. I had written the check immediately, driving it over to them in the rain, feeling like a good daughter saving the family home. I looked at the digital copy of the cash check on my computer screen. The front was written to Brandon Miller. That was standard. He said he would pay the contractor directly. But then I clicked to view the back of the check, the endorsement side. I expected to see a contractor's stamp or a deposit into my father's primary checking account. I didn't see either. The check had been endorsed by my father, but below his signature was a second stamp, Depositon Titanium Debt Relief Solutions, and below that a reference number that ended in Emma. I stared at the screen, the blood draining from my face. I opened a new tab and searched for the company. It wasn't a roofing company. It was a predatory credit consolidation agency specializing in high-risk unsecured debt. I logged into the old joint account I still shared with my mother. An account I hadn't used in years but never removed my name from. I searched the history for November. There was no payment to a roofer. There was no withdrawal for materials, but there was a transfer of $10,000 to Titanium Debt Relief, followed by a closure of a credit line in Emma's name. The pieces clicked together with the terrifying precision of a steel trap. There was no leak. There was no water on the hardwood floors. There was just Emma, my sister, racking up $10,000 in secret credit debt that she couldn't hide from her husband, Ryan, who was frugal and strict with finances. If he found out she had maxed out another card, he might have left her. So she went to Mommy and Daddy, and Mommy and Daddy came to me. They had staged a natural disaster to steal my money. They had looked me in the eye, played on my fear of their home being destroyed, and embezzled $10,000 to bail out the golden child from the consequences of her own shopping addiction. They had weaponized my empathy to subsidize her deceit. I sat back in my chair, the room spinning slightly. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. This wasn't just my parents loving her more. This was fraud. They were co-conspirators in a theft, and I was the mark. The anger that had been simmering in my gut turned into something solid and freezing cold. It wasn't rage. It was the absolute, unshakable resolve of a judge passing a life sentence. I printed the image of the check front and back. I printed the bank transfer record. I clipped them together. I didn't need to wonder if I was doing the right thing by cancelling the trip anymore. I held the evidence in my hand. This wasn't a family dispute. It was a crime scene, and I was done being the victim. I picked up my car keys. It was time to deliver the verdict. It was the 4th of July. And while the rest of the country was preparing for fireworks, my family was bringing the explosion to my doorstep. I heard them before I saw them. The heavy thud of car doors slamming, the sharp, frantic voices arguing in the driveway, and then the pounding on my front door. It wasn't a polite knock. It was the hammering of people who felt entitled to entry. I checked the security camera feed on my phone. They looked like a caricature of a holiday gone wrong. My mother, Monica, was fanning herself with a brochure, her face flushed and streaked with sweat. My father, Brandon, looked ready to kick the door down. Emma was leaning against the porch railing, looking more annoyed than devastated, while her husband, Ryan, stood a few paces back, holding one of the boys who was crying. They had clearly spent the last 6 hours in a cramped car or a cheap motel, stewing in the heat and their own victimhood. I picked up the clipped stack of papers from my desk, the printout of the check, the bank transfer records, and the credit agency report. This was my module of truth, the physical manifestation of the ledger I was about to close forever. I walked to the door, took a breath of the cool, conditioned air that filled my sanctuary and unlocked the deadbolt. When I opened the door, the heat hit me first, followed immediately by my father's voice. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" he shouted, stepping forward as if to push past me. "We have been driving around for hours, the kids are exhausted, your mother is faint, you are going to let us in. You are going to apologize and you are going to fix this mess right now." I didn't move aside. I stood in the doorway blocking the threshold. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it stopped him mid-stride. "No," Emma snapped, pushing off the railing. "Kat, stop being a psycho. We know you canned the booking. Dad says you're having a breakdown. Just let us in so we can cool off and then you can transfer the money to rebook us somewhere else. Ryan has to be back at work on Tuesday." My mother chimed in, tears already welling up on cue. "Catherine, please. We are a family. Families fight, but they don't do this. They don't leave each other stranded. Whatever you think we did, we can talk about it inside." "We aren't going inside," I said, "and we aren't talking. I just have one question for you, Dad." I lifted the papers in my hand. "How is the roof?" My father froze. His eyes flicked to the papers, then back to my face. "What, the roof?" I repeated, my voice steady and cold. "The catastrophic leak. The water pouring onto the hardwood floors. The emergency that required $10,000 in cash last November. How is it holding up?" "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, but the color was draining from his face beneath the sunburn. "We fixed it, you know, we fixed it." "That is strange," I said, stepping out onto the porch and handing the stack of papers to Ryan, not my father. Ryan, the frugal husband who watched every penny. Because according to the bank records, the money didn't go to a roofer. It went to a credit consolidation agency. I turned my gaze to Emma, specifically to pay off a titanium rewards card in the name of Emma Miller. The silence that fell over the porch was absolute. The only sound was the distant hum of traffic and the seekers buzzing in the heat. Emma looked like she might be sick. Her eyes darted to Ryan, who was reading the documents, his expression shifting from confusion to a dawning, horrified realization. "You stole from me," I said, addressing my parents. "You staged a panic attack. You lied about your home being destroyed. You took $10,000 from your daughter to cover up the fact that your other daughter can't stop spending money she doesn't have. And you," I looked at Emma, "you let them do it. You let me pay for your mistakes so you wouldn't have to face your husband." Ryan looked up from the papers. He looked at Emma, then at her parents. "Is this true?" he asked. His voice was quiet, dangerous. "Did you take $10,000 from Kat?" "It was a loan," my mother cried out, desperate to spin the narrative. "We were going to pay her back. Emma was just in a tight spot and we didn't want to worry you, Ryan. You know how you get about money." "You stole it," Ryan corrected. He looked at the paper again, then back at his wife. He didn't scream. He just walked away, heading back to the car with their son still in his arms. "Ryan, wait," Emma screamed, running after him. I turned back to my parents. They stood there, stripped of their righteous anger, exposed as the con artists they were. "I am not keeping score anymore," I told them. "I am closing the book. This paper is the receipt for my freedom. I paid $45,000 to find out exactly who you people are. It was expensive, but it was worth it to finally know the truth. Catherine, you can't leave us like this," my father pleaded, his voice breaking. "We have nowhere to go. You have each other," I said. "And you have the consequences of your own actions. The Bank of Cat is permanently closed." I stepped back inside and closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. I watched on the monitor as they stood on the porch for a moment longer, looking at the closed door. Before slowly turning to retreat into the heat, they were finally gone. I leaned against the closed door, exhaling a breath I felt I had been holding for 20 years. The house was quiet again. The air conditioning kicked on with a soft hum, a stark contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded on my doorstep. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of wine, the cool condensation on the glass grounding me in the present. I walked out to my back garden. It wasn't a Malibu villa. It was a modest, carefully landscaped sanctuary I had designed myself, filled with drought-resistant succulents and blooming jasmine. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the yard. In the distance, I heard the pop and crackle of fireworks beginning to light up the sky. My phone chimed. It was a notification from my bank. Refund processed, Sapphire Cove rentals, amount $21,900. I stared at the number. It was just money. It couldn't buy back the years I had wasted trying to be enough for people who would never be satisfied. It couldn't erase the memory of my father's betrayal or my sister's entitlement, but it could buy me something else. It could buy me silence. It could buy me space. It could buy me a future that was entirely my own. I took a sip of wine and watched the first firework bloom overhead, a burst of gold against the darkening sky. I was alone on the 4th of July. My family was gone, fractured by the truth I had finally forced them to see. Ryan would likely leave Emma. My parents would have to face their financial reality without my safety net. The fallout would be messy and painful. But as I stood there in the quiet of my own garden, I realized that being alone didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like a luxury I had finally purchased for myself. I was no longer the architect of their comfort. I was the architect of my own life. And for the first time, the foundation was solid. If you've ever had to buy your own freedom from the people who were supposed to love you for free, share this story and tell me in the comments what was the moment you finally closed your wallet. If you enjoyed the story, hit like and subscribe for more story. Share this story. You are not alone. God bless you. Thanks for watching.